Did you know that the word villain does not appear in The Hero with a Thousand Faces? Campbell doesn't talk about villains or bad guys in most of his works. The conflict, whether nature or man or the self, is just a metaphor of the struggles of that society. So telling a story about a person who makes bad choices is the same as telling a story about a person who makes good choices. Campbell would say that every action has good and bad consequences in real life.
Black and white are the qualities of every act. Every act has both good and evil.
And you will be able to save your wife from certain death.
For every good action, according to some, there is a consequence considered evil by others. So there is no villain's journey in story. Vogler even states that villains are the heroes of their own stories, or they're the shadows of that hero, representing something the hero must overcome or integrate. So how do you tell a story about a villain as the main character? Well, simple. If they are the main character, then they are no longer a villain. So what about an anti-hero? Most would qualify Harley Quinn as an anti-hero. A general definition of an anti-hero is morally ambiguous, but I don't think this is the best way to use it. Vogler says there are two types of anti-heroes. One, characters who behave much like conventional heroes, but are given a strong touch of cynicism or have a wounded quality. Or two, tragic heroes, central figures of a story who may not be likable or admirable, whose actions we may even deplore, like Macbeth or Scarface. But I want to break it down a little more than that. The term basically means anti-hero archetype. So whatever form a typical hero takes in that time, whatever a hero means to people, that anti-hero is in opposition to that.
I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
They serve as a foil to the archetype. They subvert expectations. Literary theorist and critic Herman Northrop Frye suggested that there is a center of gravity one must find in order to provide literary analysis on these characters, or to provide literary analysis in general. He says, unless there is such a center, there is nothing to prevent the analogies supplied by convention and genre from being an endless series of free associations, perhaps suggestive, perhaps even tantalizing, but never creating a real structure. If archetypes are communicable symbols, and there is a center of archetypes, we should expect to find at that center a group of universal symbols. Frye describes the shift from epics to romance to ironic narratives as a result of this shift in the center of gravity. The archetypes change for a collective. They get tired of them, they outgrow them, the society evolves past them. The hero is like a lion, but what if the hero was like a turtle? The hero is a man, but what if the hero was a woman? What is the archetype, and what is the answer to that archetype that connotes a societal shift? Some would summarize this as the norm, but I like to make things a little more complicated, so I kept coming back to the term zeitgeist. The terms pop culture and mass media acknowledge that there are trends and shifts in the consumption of media that, although can be studied after the fact, are mostly unpredictable. So when unexplainable, blame it on the zeitgeist. But this German word Zeitgeist, or spirit of the times, comes from philosopher George W.F. Hegel, who believed that all art is a product of its time. All art is a reflection of the current culture. Not a controversial idea, I would say. Even now, the center of gravity is shifting from an era of superheroes to antiheroes. I mean, technically, our superheroes have already been given the anti-hero makeover. They break the molds that came before, even if they are the same characters from the same source material. They're more real, more complex, more relatable to the society of today. However, this is happening at the time of global death tolls and general unrest. Either way, with the failure of something like Dark Universe on one hand, and the way DC plows ahead with its films about villains on the other hand, not to mention the manipulation of the so-called hopeful messaging in the final installment of the Star Wars saga, It seems like the studios are getting mixed messages on what the audiences want in a blockbuster film. They don't understand what the center of gravity actually is. So what would I say is at the center of gravity? Complex heroes and heroines that have happy endings? Well, yeah. Remember Dark Ray? The image of her sparked hundreds of fan arts and fanfics because women saw themselves in this version of Ray. Even after the film showed a disappointing 17 seconds of this shadow, weird pointy teeth and all, fans still clung to her. It's obvious that Ray would not completely fall to the dark side, but to flirt with darkness, to come face to face with the shadow inside, that's incredibly relatable. Feminine-coded characters on screen deserve to be just as complex, flawed, and damaged as masculine-coded ones. But they also don't deserve to be punished for that. The more complex they are, the more the audience is rooting for them to have a happy ending, to come back with the elixir to bestow on their community. I'd even argue that if the audience doesn't want a happy ending, they certainly need it. It's a hopeful message to say that even though you are flawed and broken, you deserve happiness. Now, I want to talk about this version of Harley Quinn. When you put Harley in a story where she isn't the main character, she's sort of a tag-along of the shadows of the heroes. She's basically third tier. She's iconic and memorable, sure, but also she's sort of tragic. I would not have ever used the word empowering to describe Harley Quinn, but center a story around Harley and you get a potential that's really endearing. Harley was always a victim of circumstance as well as a character with tragic flaws. She's whip-smart and capable, but also lonely and easily fixated. Hodson and Robbie wrote Harley as someone who likes hanging out with her girlfriends, who parties like there's no tomorrow, consequences be damned, and the consequences are damned. She's someone who doesn't take care of her hair when she's going through shit, and compartmentalizes her problems so she can focus on short-term pleasures. These aren't things all women experience, but they certainly are things women may experience and relate to. But the greatest thing about Harley is that not only is she an anti-heroine, she's also feminine-coded. She likes pink, shoots sparkles, and dresses her taxidermy beaver in a tutu. She likes painting nails, has daddy issues, and is on a roller derby team. She likes margaritas, keeps spare tampons in her pocket, and dreams in old musicals, like another classic anti-heroine. Many anti-heroines, of which there are not many in Western media, are more masculine-coded. They are praised and celebrated because they were just as smart or just as strong as the men in their stories. They're always being compared to men.
Am I the only one who can work and drink at the same time?
In this tale, Harley is not. In Eastern media, especially in anime and dramas, there are so many more anti-heroines to enjoy who are both problematic and feminine-coded. And most of this is due to the fact that most of the writers of television in Asia are women. In South Korea, 90% of the directors, writers, producers, executive producers, editors, and photography directors are women. In the US, it's just 27%. The real reason we need this in Western media is because anti-heroines are begging to be written by women, and women directors are begging to write complex, flawed characters. In other words, this is about representation. Changing the tides to make way for more diverse and interesting femme fatales or magic girls. Why don't we have more anti-heroines, even though we know anti-heroes and even villains are so often more popular than heroes?
There are not roles like this for women right now. It's really, ooh.
You're reading the man's part.
Women deserve this representation in media. We deserve more stories. And not just feminine-coded anti-heroines, but it's certainly a start. Because it seems like popular Western media, despite how far it's come, is still desperately protective over its heroines. The characters are either feminine-coded do-gooders or masculine-coded badasses. What about all the stuff in between? We have so many stories to tell. Just as we shifted from heroes to anti-heroes, we need to shift the center of gravity from anti-heroes to anti-heroines. We need to subvert what it means to be a hero. And damn it, we need to give them a happily ever after.